The United States have always been the country of immigrants. As Obama said in one of the interviews that if you're not a Native American, you come from somewhere. Over the period of near 500 years, there have been various reasons for immigrants to move to the US from their home country. It started with the Europeans trying to establish a living. Some moved here for freedom to practice their own religion and were called pilgrims, while others came here as a punishment for a conviction in their home country. Then came a huge wave of immigrants, which was from the 1680s to the 1700s, and those were the Africans. They were brought here against their will by the Americans due to the period of colonization. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was one of the first steps towards the immigration, or should I say, against immigration. In mid-19th century, Chinese came to join the gold rush that began at California. Chinese could be found throughout the region, laboring in agriculture, mining industry, and wherever workers were needed. They are best known for their contribution to the railroad industry. While they were growing, the white workers viewed them as economic competitors and racial inferiors, thereby it led to the passage of discriminatory laws and commission of widespread acts of violence against the Chinese. And hence, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was there. This was banning the entry of the Chinese into the US. Immigration Act of 1891 was basically reversing the Immigration Act of 1882. This act declared that certain classes of individuals were unfit to become American citizens. Those classes included idiots, insane persons, and paupers. Any person who could become a public charge on society was also not allowed to enter. The immigrants who came to the United States carrying a contagious disease were also not permitted entry. Anyone who had been convicted of a felony, misdemeanor, or any other crime were not granted the citizenship as well. Up until the 1900s, the states individually regulated their own immigration, right? Immigration Act of 1903 stated that immigration was not only now a federal responsibility and therefore expanding its power to its particular matter. 1924. The Immigration Act of 1924 limited the number of immigrants allowed entry into the United States through a national origins quota. The quota provided immigration visas to 2% of the total number of people of each nationality in the United States as of the 1890 national census. It completely excluded immigrants from Asia, though. Now we will be talking about one of the other but minority group in the America, which were the Mexicans and the Mexican Americans and their suffrage during the ever-changing immigration laws of the United States. Much like the Chinese, Mexicans were also assigned lower-paying jobs and were racially discriminated. Texas originally belonged to Mexico, but during the Mexican-American War, the US won, and hence Texas became a part of the US. This led to giving thousands of Mexicans the citizenship of the US. Despite being the US citizens with full rights, Mexican Americans quickly found themselves outnumbered, outvoted, and ultimately outcast. Corrupt state and local governments favored white settlers in land disputes. Mining companies and cattle barons discriminated against Mexican Americans as they did against Chinese workers in terms of pay and working conditions. And to fight this, Las Coras Blancas was an organization of a group of people that came together and rebelled against them. Around this time, the quota system was in practice and allowed only a very few percentage of immigrants from different minority groups as a result of the Great Depression. The economic crisis known as the Great Depression led the President Herbert Hoover to mandate that immigrants had to prove that they would not become a public charge, disqualifying people who would not financially support themselves indefinitely. The Bracero program was one of the major acts towards the Mexican Americans and was basically a program which allowed millions of guest workers into the US. It was the largest contract labor of all time in the US, which let around 4 million Mexicans in and out of the country. But the other thing of Bracero program was that Mexicans, while they were coming here, they were not really treated nicely. They were stripped down of their clothes and they were sprayed with water so that they couldn't have any dirt on them, basically. Now we'll be talking about another group of immigrants, which were the Jewish. Between 1880 and the onset of restrictive immigration quotas in 1924, over 2 million Jews from Russia, Austria-Hungary, and Romania came to America. Once again, the character of American Jewry was transformed as the Eastern Europeans became the majority. Many went to the English classes at night, adopting American dress and customs. Ultimately, they were learned to fit in, to think like Americans, and to be American. Jewish Americans have also faced problems, especially during periods of economic hardship or war. During World War I and the Great Depression, Jews were often targeted as scapegoats. Due to the quota system, the number of Jews trying to flee to the US meant that immigrants had to wait, often for years, on a list after the war. President Truman favored effort to ease US immigrant restrictions for Jewish displaced persons. Over the years, the immigration policy has changed several times and it had consequences. Immigration laws over the years have not only affected the US citizens or the minority groups in the US, but also affected people all over the world, people who aspire to come here and pursue their American dream. Thank you.